And this is what I wanted to talk about. First of all, this is my problem with Game of Thrones, right? It's that so the original series, what I liked about it, the only thing I like about it is really the dragons, to be honest. I like fantasy stories. I like stories that, get me enwrapped in their world and have their own laws and their own rules, and there's history and language and dynamics between different peoples, and there's little esoteric secrets that you can pick up, like with obviously with the Silmarillion. And there's the epic battle struggle between good and evil, and it gets very, it can get epic, and it can get heroic. When I started watching Game of Thrones, obviously the first thing that I loved was the dragons. The little dragon eggs hatched and stuff, and then obviously the introduction of the White Walkers, and the concept that I liked in it was the fact that even though these kingdoms were all petty and squabbling over each other for power, that there was this greater evil coming from the north, and that you needed Daenerys and her dragons to combat it. And it felt like spiritual, even almost the sense that these magical beings were necessary, were going to become necessary to ultimately fight the White Walkers off. And I remember even seeing that one of the White Walkers got killed. I mean, one of the dragons got killed and turned into a White Walker type of creature at one point. So that was the big deal for me. And Game of Thrones did not deliver. I spent 7 seasons, 8, whatever it was. I think season 6 is the last one I watched. I spent all those seasons waiting for this epic moment of spirituality, of good fighting over evil and triumphing that you get from Lord of the Rings and that you get from the Silmarillion. And I never got it. Instead, I got a crazy. I didn't get it. Let's just say I didn't get it. And this is the same thing here, where they're setting up Rhaenyra to be like this queen, to be like, she's like, it's almost spiritual, and like, oh wow, we're gonna have a queen, and she's gonna usher, kind of like Queen Elizabeth, she's gonna usher in something like a new era. It's gonna be wonderful. Yeah, she's gonna struggle, but she's on the side of the righteousness. I don't like to use that word, but she's on the side of of positivity, of something that is going to be good for what's not, isn't that cool? What do you mean? That she's going to be part of this change in the history and the outlook of Westeros. And of course, the dragons. I'm always going to be a fan of dragons. I love dragons. It's great to see them on screen. But she's not. That's the problem, though. See, because I ended up wanting to read ahead, and I discovered that she's not going to be part of any change. And that, if anything, we're going to get more of the typical Game of Thrones, which is just tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy, cruelty, betrayal, hubris, stupidity, sheer cruelty. By the end of it all, it's just without, you tell me what you want to know. I won't tell you beyond what you want to know, because I don't want to spoil it. But I needed to know where the story was going. I am not going to invest seasons of my time into a show. I might just do it to cover it and talk about it. Yeah. Hello, Corey. Yes. That's all he has to offer. I cannot spend my precious time just to see cruelty. I can go outside of my door and experience cruelty on a daily fucking basis. I do not want my art and my entertainment to provide me more of the depressing shit that I see every day. And that's my problem with this show. Also, anybody that loves history, and I love history, even though I am an amateur by all means, can see where this guy is ripping off. He didn't even come up with anything original. I mean, again, like at least in the Silmarillion, we have a completely different Earth, completely different land masses, geography, peoples that were not meant to be allegorical in any sense. They may reflect and they may inspire and evoke things that we know from ancient history, but in no way did they ever try to replicate or emulate them. While here we have literally European history thrown back in our faces, worship of royalty thrown back in our faces after we've struggled, since the Magna Carta, we've struggled to be able to rip ourselves away from worship of people as gods, something that has plagued humanity since the pharaohs, if not before that. And this show basically wants you to praise Targaryens like they're special. I do find it funny that the Targaryens are the shit of Valyria, to put it bluntly, that they are no royalty. In fact, there's even the possibility that they're the ones that caused the doom of Valyria, but I don't know to what extent that is just a fan theory. But that's my problem. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, this is my issue with the show. And I don't want to like characters like Daemon. Fortunately, you know what? Daemon's outcome in all of this, I'm okay with. I think that he does try to give us. It's not really about female power. Yeah, but look, this is the problem. There's a difference between what the book wrote and what the show is trying to evoke. This show, as it is written by these writers and the people behind it, are trying, but it's not. They're trying to evoke feminine power as something that can step in and bring light to this dark world, can bring enlightenment, kind of like Elizabethan England. Like they really do set her up to be like a Queen Elizabeth, and we are hoping and expecting that to happen, that there's going to be a struggle and people are going to die for sure, but that she's going to come out triumphant and usher an age of prosperity and enlightenment. And we're not going to get that from the show. We're not going to get it ever. And so why waste my time to be cruelly manipulated emotionally, have my sentimentality manipulated to end up having another disappointment? I can't deal with that. That's too much. I think it's too depressing, and it, not to mention that I can't stand how it rips off history as well. Because I do have a fascination with Britain and its history because of its connection, and I'm gonna point out all the parallels later. But you tell me, do you want to go first through this episode and then go through the analysis? I suppose we should do that first. Because the episode, in and of itself and as a piece of entertainment, yeah. But they did a good job amping up the girl power in this. First of all, we love this table, right? This table was great. I loved the idea and the concept of it. Well, it's a lot of fun. They did a good job setting up girl power in the show in a way that was much better and believable than Rings of Power. For sure, I could believe it, and I could follow it. But knowing what they're going to do to this character, especially Rhaenyra, I really, after watching Viserys and the relation. Look, here's another thing. Yeah, well, here's another issue I have, and this was a personal one. I feel strongly about daddy-daughter relationships. I feel more emotional about father-daughter relationships than I do about father-son relationships for some reason. And the relationship that Viserys had with Rhaenyra, even though it was rocky, to me has a significance. He tried so hard to set her up for her reign. Charlie holding the football. I was really, he really loved her. It was an extension of his love for his wife. It was an extension of him accepting his hubris and becoming humble and understanding that a woman can do what is expected of a king. And Rhaenyra really took it seriously too. I mean, she could have turned her back on all of this way back when it was when it was when she was with Sir Kristen. You know, they could have run away together and turned their backs on this, and it feels like many times in the show in this season, she has thought about it, whether it's even worth it, especially when she was talking to her father on his deathbed. It really felt like she was really questioning whether this was the way she wanted to go in her life, you know? In that sense, she's like Alicent, where both of them have their fathers push them in a direction that maybe they would have never had taken if they had been given an option as to what their future should be, you know? So that affects me personally because I now have an investment in Rhaenyra given the relationship that she's had with her father, and to see what Martin does to this character in the books of what I've read so far about it, you know, my research, what happens to her to me is not only tragic, but it's sacrilegious. It's insulting, it's disgusting, and I just can't stand that man. I'm never gonna read his shit. I'm never gonna spend more time on his stuff, because you can't set up a character like this. And maybe it's more these writers. Maybe it's not quite like this in the book. Maybe in the book she's kind of more of a bitch, and she's kind of more arrogant, and she's kind of more power hungry. But in the show, she's not. I know, but here's the problem though. Do we trust HBO after what they did with Game of Thrones? I mean, Game of Thrones was good until they got to the last season. Oh, is she a spoiled brat in the books? Okay, then that would make sense. But then you're really gonna have to depart from the books in the show, and I don't trust them to do that. I don't trust them. I think they're gonna keep the master strokes. They like creating characters that are like this one. She's the realm's delight, yes. And I like that she's the realm's delight, but I like this personification of her, I guess, more than the spoiled brat. If she was a spoiled brat the way, then I would be like whatever. But I don't trust HBO to go their own direction with this. They're gonna keep the master stroke. I think what they want to do is set up a very endearing character, a sympathetic character, and then destroy her before our eyes so that we feel tragedy, so that we feel like depressed, like someone who is good in this world is bound. It's kind of like The Walking Dead. One of my biggest issues with The Walking Dead, is that I hear what you're saying, and thanks for that information. Yeah, this is a much better portrayal. But one of my issues with Walking Dead was I love the Welsh actor that plays I think it was Rick, and I loved how no matter how tragic things got for Rick, he kept pushing forward. He understood. He followed his dark ember. He understood that he had to be a level of cruel, a level of headstrong to make the group survive, to make his clan survive in the environment of zombies, right, and cruel people that survived it. But overall, The Walking Dead teaches you good people can't survive in this world, and I don't agree with that. I just don't. It's not true. You look around you and you spend time with real people, and you realize that the cruelty that they constantly put in TV and in entertainment is not the cruelty of most of humanity. It is the cruelty of Hollywood. I can tell you that much. Having a sister that works in Hollywood, I can tell you that they are very disgusting people. They are very cruel. They are very. They are like what you see in Game of Thrones. They will rip your heart out. They will destroy your family if they can for their own good. They are that obsessed with fame, with glory, and that's something that's been reserved in the past for royalty. So I feel like we have traded royalty and the vestiges of all of that for celebrity, and celebrity is worse, because before we just had a king and a queen and a royal family and nobles, and now we have anybody can be a celebrity, anybody can be a piece of crap, and anybody can. I mean, just look what happened. Just look what's going on in Twitch, what's going on in all these stupid social media platforms, what they're doing now with Elon Musk taking over Twitter. it's never ending. Like, that's why I never want a Twitter. I never want to be on Twitter. Like, it's just never ending, the nastiness that it draws and brings upon people, the evil eye that it draws to people, and it's meant to be that way. So I think that HBO is going to build this character up, and then they're going to tear her down and destroy her before our eyes, and that's just tragic. I'm kind of glad that I cheated and I saw ahead, because I mean, I needed to know. But then we can also get into the fact of how this rips off ancient history in a very, I want to, not interesting. It's interesting because of dragons. Other than that, it's very allegorical. It's very unimaginative. But we have the scene with Lucerys, where Lucerys doubts his. The point of this scene from a writing standpoint is the fact that Lucerys is gonna die, right? We already know he's gonna die. Why? Because a beautiful little boy like this, wide-eyed, who just wants to be good and honor his family, is not going to survive in the world, right? He is going to die in the world of Game of Thrones, because the world of Game of Thrones chews and spits out little boys like him for breakfast. But his mom, she's very endearing. She's also a good mother. She tells him that it's okay, that it is possible for him to become what he's going to become, that she's going to be there for him every step of the way. And sadly, she does make a mistake. Remember, I told you way back before Viserys even died that Viserys should have killed Alicent and the High Towers and removed them. That's what he should have done. That's what a good king would have done. I'm sorry to say it. It sounds awful. He would have either removed them, exiled them, or he would have killed them, because he should have known, and he knew, that the rift created by him remarrying Alicent and having children with them was going to lead to the tragedy of the Dance of the Dragons. I mean, anybody with a half a brain knows that, and we know he's not an idiot, because he also was aware of his own daughter's transgressions, her infidelities, as it were, and he never once criticized her for it, which is interesting. So they show us his character in the beginning because he's gonna die in the end, and it's to set up this dynamic that we already know in freaking Game of Thrones and HBO, that good people are meant to die on this show. Again, I don't agree with it. I think it's disgusting. Side note, I do love the costume of the Knight's Guard. Correct, Alicent, and mind you, I do think again, Alicent. Here's the funny thing with Alicent, I do feel like her tragedy I can accept, because from the beginning, Alicent was kind of doomed. From the beginning, her relationship with her father was very different from Alicent with Rhaenyra. Viserys with Rhaenyra, where she was being screwed over by her father from the beginning. So for her to deteriorate over time is meant to happen. Sadly, it's going to happen. There's no way around it. Unless someone removes Otto, and sadly, Otto doesn't get removed until things already, get blown out of proportion. This is another thing about Game of Thrones that I can't stand. It purposely wants to raise your anxiety level so that, yeah, you get the blood rush of like, oh my God, I feel something. Shit's happening. Shit's going down. But then you realize that, oh my God, I don't need that in my life. I have enough anxiety in real life. I don't need to feel anxiety for some shit that's fake, But, she has the miscarriage because of the anxiety that this creates for her, which makes a lot of sense. And it's the daughter, Visenya. But I thought Rhaenys was going to be more comforting and give her support. It's kind of weird because she doesn't, but she does. Like, she's going to be there for this. She's obviously on her side. But she's not there for her. She's not warm with her in any kind of sense, which she is for her own granddaughters. And the one good thing I do want to say about all this is that Baela and Rhaena do survive this entire thing, by the way. I mean, there's been a lot of issues with Targaryen women having children anyway. We seen her mom die. We saw Lena die, and here she almost dies. So again, there's something being insinuated about royals and their inability to follow a pregnancy to full term. Whether that's a commentary on the incestuous part or not, I don't know, and I don't care. But I did feel that Rhaenys should have been a little more supportive. It really felt like I thought she was, especially the way she exited so triumphantly. And here Damon is criticizing her and saying, "How did you?" Again, Damon says what I say. How did you not just burn them? She could have just burned them all in that crypt. Excuse me, the sept. She could have burned them all in that sept with her dragon, and the whole thing would have been over in an instant, right? So there's a lot of missed opportunities here, and it's an interesting thing to learn because the question is also the question of is it wiser to restrain yourself from becoming as cruel as your enemy? Is that wiser? And typically you would say yes, it is wiser, but sometimes when you know your enemy for what it is, I mean, we go back to the whole new shadow of Tolkien and the knowing evil for what it is. When you know evil for what it is, you can't give it leeway. You have to cut it down at the roots. It's like a weed in your garden, right? You don't just wait for the weed to come up. The moment you have weeds, you yank them out by the roots. So this was a missed opportunity, and Rhaenys is going to suffer for it down the line. My understanding is that it was Jacaerys who decides on bringing out the dragon seeds. Or was it Daemon's idea? Because here, I now know that dragon that Daemon finds in the crypt is Vermithor, which was the dragon that Jacaerys rode when he was still alive. So no one's been riding Vermithor. And Vermithor is going to be ridden by one of the dragon seeds later on. But I don't know if that scene was meant to evoke that it was Daemon's idea to create the dragon seed, or was it Jacaerys? I don't know. That's an interesting, thing of note, because I think whoever thought of that, it was kind of cool. I do like the idea of it. Let's add more dragon riders to help the fight. Even though it ends kind of tragically as well, of course, that much I can go with. I can deal with betrayal because that's a human constant. Yeah, see, and this is why Daemon is awesome. This is why Daemon is my favorite character. If I were to follow this show, it would be for Daemon, because I know that someone like Daemon is always 5 steps ahead of everybody else. And honestly, I understand that Rhaenyra is the queen now, and that we have to respect her judgment and her place as the queen, but she really should defer to Daemon in this, because Daemon is the only one with a track record of how to fight and win battles. And this is the battle for your life, for your children's life. Like, you cannot take it for granted at this point that everything is off the table. Like, Alicent will come for your kids. So yeah, he's been preparing for this. He's got a plan, and he knows what he's fighting up against, right? He's been observant this entire season since he came back, since Lena passed away and he got back with Rhaenyra. But Daemon, for all that everybody says about him, he's respectful of the crown. And when Jacaerys comes in, like he just did now, and said, well, the queen has said not to do anything just yet, he's really upset about it, right? Because we do have that scene where he grabs Rhaenyra by the throat, because it's like, and I get that, because it's like, you know what I am. Daemon is definitely the closest one to being a dragon. He is like Caraxes. And you restraining a dragon is evil, right? The reason why the dragons have been getting smaller and smaller is because they keep them in those stupid crypts instead of letting them roam free. And there's something to be said about humanity and wildness versus being forced to tame that in an unnatural way, like a crypt, which is very religious, as opposed to you learning discipline, which is what the true Christianity was meant to be, a discipline, not a religion.
Dude.
And you doing this to Damon, he's been restraining himself, you know, respectfully, but now is the time to unleash the dragon, you know? Now's the time to let the real Aegon conqueror come out of him. Because if there's anyone that evokes that, I do like the Valyria myth, because it's like Numenor, but it's a little more. I don't want to say realistic, but Numenor had a sense of nobility to it, right? There was a sense of, of highness to them and of respect that you felt that you needed to give the Numenorians because of their heritage and what they achieved. Not so much with Valyria. You could tell that from the beginning it was just bad. It was doomed from the beginning because of what they did to people and how they used their newfound powers. And I think that's a little bit more accurate, more realistic. I mean, let's face it, it's an Atlantis myth, right? Numenor is an Atlantis myth, and Valyria is an Atlantis myth. So we see the same recurring themes in all of these fantasy writers, right? Going back to Tolkien, going back to C.S. Lewis didn't really touch upon it because C.S. Lewis really did want to focus on the Christian mythos of the Messiah with the Son of Man. And that was really, I think, his saving grace, even though his fantasy stories are not quite as self-cohesive as Middle Earth or even this. But Aslan is a much better character than almost any character in fantasy written right now that I can think of. Aslan gives you a sense of comfort. He gives you a sense of solidity. He gives you a sense of there is something beyond all this. But it's interesting to see the differences in how they are evoked in the different versions of it. And I do feel the Valyria version is perhaps closer to Numenor in its end. I do think that Tolkien's version is still better in the sense that it had to have grown in power, and then like everything has a height and a decline, just like we're seeing in that right now in Western civilization with America, right? America had a rise because of its natural resources, because of the devastation of World War I and World War II. It opened up the avenue for America to step in that vacuum with its resources and with its championship, I guess, if you want to even use that word, of the Christian civilization that had been come over from Europe. And now it's in decline because it has turned its back on all of those values, right? And it's doomed. I mean, it's a matter. I've already settled on the fact that it's going to be China. I go back to Peaky Blinders, and I think that Peaky Blinders is probably the best show to watch because it's like Gomorrah. It's always true to human nature. And they teach you things on there that are irrevocable. And there's a line between the Jewish character played by Tom Hardy and the actual character Tom, that I forget the actor. The actor is great. Again, another Welsh actor, I think, maybe. And he says, "Big always fucks small." Right? In that season, the American-Italian mafia comes to England and tries to strong-arm the Peaky Blinders to do their will and to give up everything that they've earned. And the only way Peaky Blinders are able to defeat the Italian-American mafia, that is huge at this point in time, bigger than anything in I guess, in UK, is to get a bigger mafia boss than the one that came over, which was, oh shit, I forgot the name. The famous one. Gotti? No, I'm blanking out right now. Sorry, but and that's how it works. So we are not going to be able to overthrow the government by force or by voting or by anything of that nature. They are going to destroy the West the way it has happened in every generation or every height of every civilization, and then it's going to be something bigger than our government, which is Ta-ta-da! China. It's going to be China that's going to dismantle them and destroy them in the end. And that's my prediction. I'm making the prediction, what, 2022? I guarantee you, but before 2030, it'll happen. In any case, and that's what I read in my story, by the way. That's what I have in my novel. I think I've shared it with Valentina, so she knows a little bit about it. Remember, it's the Chinese that come and take over in the end and remove all the heads of state in the politics of America. In any case, she has a miscarriage. We talked about it. It's very sad. So cheerful. Well, no, look, the enemy of here's another saying: the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So for right now, China is my friend. Like, I don't hate on China. If it takes whatever his name is, Yun Jinping, I don't know what his name is. If it takes them to remove at this point, I don't know if you guys heard Pelosi's husband got stabbed or attacked in his home. And you got to think about it. I also saw that coming. How destitute is a person have to get? How desperate, right? To get to that point where they are literally willing to basically commit suicide by breaking into somebody's house and trying to stab them to death. And he was looking for the wife. I don't hate China for now. I don't. The enemy of my enemy is my friend for now. And China is the enemy of my government. So they are my friend. And since I can't fight them, I'm not going to... When I was 20 years old, I saw this coming and I was like, I need to rally a brotherhood, which is, again, what my story is about to some extent. And it is necessary to some extent, but now I see it more for survival than I do to bring down or topple a government and cause a revolution. No, the revolution is going to be China. Anyway, I'm straying from the story, because I really want to get into my whole breakdown and analysis of how this just rips off European royal history in a very expected way, and I like it. I like European history enough to find these analogies. When I was looking into the Targaryen history, the very first thing that set me off, was Aegon the Fourth, the Unworthy, because Aegon the Fourth is literally like Henry the Eighth. It's clearly Henry the Eighth. So once I saw that happen, I'm like, okay, this guy is doing that. So Aegon the Conqueror is clearly William the Conqueror, which is a very controversial figure because William the Conqueror, just like Aegon, changed the entire trajectory of the British Isle history. And Aegon did the same to Westeros. Only difference is that William the Conqueror didn't have dragons, but he might as well have had dragons for all that he did and all the devastation that he brought to the Anglo-Saxons. But that's where I already was seeing the parallels involved, and how it permeates through the Targaryen history line. I stopped at the Blackfyre rebellions because then it started getting really complicated, and I had already invested way too many hours into looking into it. But at some point, I'll get to the Blackfyre rebellions and try to see what they're doing there. I do think that was interesting and different. The difference between Aegon IV and Henry Tudor is that Henry Tudor changed the religion of England with the Church of England, right? He rejected... I know there's like a lot of rebellions. I understand that. Henry Tudor changed the religion with the Church of England and, turned his back on the Vatican, which was a huge, huge thing, right? Because the Vatican was the elite of that time. It is and is to this day to some extent, but back then the Pope was everything, right? And Aegon, all he did really was just legitimize his bastard children, which I don't even know how you can get away with that. Because here we have, for example, Viserys. Viserys legitimized Rhaenyra as his heir, but once he died, no one gave a shit. So why did anybody give a shit once Aegon died that he legitimized the bastards? They're still bastards, but It does make sense too because they didn't like Daeron, who is the successor, and Daeron was also the first one to marry a Martell, I believe. There is, for example, we know that we have Aegon the Second after this, and Aegon the Third, and then Viserys, who is these are Rhaenyra's children. Um, there was Daeron who conquers Dorne, and there's his brother Balon or Baelor the Blessed. Baelor the Blessed is a ripoff of Julian the Apostate in Roman, who was a Roman emperor. I know him because I really was interested in him. Constantine transformed the religion of Rome into Christianity at the time, which became obviously the Catholic Church, which is the beginning of something very bad. It's the beginning of anti-Christianity, in my opinion. And Julian the Apostate comes sometime later, and he denounces Christianity and tries to get back to the pagan ways of old Rome. And this is why I don't like House of the Dragon in the end, is because we are being forced to worship and look up to royalty. When Aegon becomes king in this, you get the sense of like, oh, we are fucked, because once you assume the title king, it's almost like assuming the title god. I can do whatever I want now, right? So it is still a form of god worship, pharaoh worship. It goes back to Egypt, which obviously geese in this world of Game of Thrones, geese evokes Egypt, and that was slavery. I mean, it was the worst kind of slavery. I mean, ancient history has the worst atrocities towards humanity, as bad as we still have them today. A lot of what the civilized world gave us with monotheism was the understanding that people have rights and should be able to stand up for them. They have in the past, but in the past it was always tribal. So unless different tribes, that's why the Celts got destroyed by the Romans in the end, right? But anyway, Julian the Apostate is Baelor the Blessed. So they've thrown out everything out the window. All their laws and all their rules are out the window. It's every man for himself in terms of the throne, the Iron Throne. And when you think of how the Iron Throne was created, it was always meant to end tragically when you think about it. Aegon the Conqueror could have achieved more through diplomacy and manipulation than just through sheer forcing people to bend the knee because he has dragons. But then again, that's kind of what William the Conqueror did, right? I mean, the reason why William the Conqueror is not remembered admirably is because he did the same thing to the Saxons. You know, he had the capacity to be more diplomatic and manipulative and convinced. He could have kept the Saxon lords in power. No, instead he brought in all the Normans. He brought in whoever sought favor with him, and he oppressed all the lords, screwed them, set them on fire, tortured them, oppressed them. That's why we ended up having eventually Robin Hood later on, because the legacy that was created by William the Conqueror led to what the forcing of the Magna Carta against Henry II, and only a few generations later. You know, before that, the Saxons did not have that problem. Westeros is also very much like Britain when the Saxons were there. You had several kingdoms in different regions of the island that were united by a growing sense of nationality that was barely starting, because you did have Danish peoples, you did have from what's now Denmark. They were all different tribes of Goths and Germanic tribes that moved into England and pushed the Welsh, well, what we call now the Welsh, right? But were the Celtic Britons west and north. But eventually they kind of coexisted in a sense, and they respected each other's borders in a sense. And You had Mercia, and you had Wessex, and Essex, and Sussex, and Northumbria, and all these kingdoms were willing to even join together to fight out the Viking raids. Again, the sheer map of Westeros goes to show how unimaginative this guy's creation of Westeros is to begin with. He didn't even try to do something different. You have these different kingdoms in Britain, just like you had in Westeros. Nothing. It's not to say that they were all great, but they all had their dominion, and they respected each other's dominion, and for the most part, and they could come together when they needed to fight something. I know it's a cool table. It is. They fought together when they needed to. That's the famous Battle of Maldon that happens around few generations before William the Conqueror comes, before all of that goes down. We don't want to big up our Western culture and its values and what we've done to achieve what we have achieved, right? We're not going to. Now it's all about disparaging all of our values and our faith. But nonetheless, my point here is that it was the same thing. It's a complete copy and paste with Westeros in that front, and then Aegon the Conqueror comes in with his dragons and his sister wives, demolishes everything but Dorne. Well, not demolishes, but for the most part. I mean, obviously the Western lands gave in. They formed a strange connection with the Vale. I thought the way the Vale came into the fold was a little interesting, because I don't think they would have won against the Vale. I think they would have had a really hard time. The Vale is really well fortified because of its geography and the Erie. But and then of course the North just straight up gave up, which was smart. There's no point in going up again. Big fuck small. If Aegon has dragons, there's nothing you can do. You're just better off joining forces with him, But it was necessary also for the storyline of the history of what Martin is trying to develop. It was necessary for the Stormlands to be demolished and the Riverlands to be demolished. It makes sense, because those are the most contentious lands. And because it's surrounded by, King's Landing is, in that area. King's Landing evokes London, don't you think? It really evokes London. London was originally a Celtic fort. It was a Roman fort. And before that, it belonged to the Britons, because Boudica, I believe, fought and regained it at one point in her battles. And I believe the original name of London comes from Lundain, which was again a Celtic Briton city and fort. And King's Landing was originally Aegon Fort. So there's a lot of just blatant. If I can make all these connections, and I have a very topical understanding of my history of Britain and Europe, any of you can do this, right? It's just very unimaginative, and it's very derivative, and you ask yourself, okay, if you really have, Tolkien had something to share with us about the world that he wanted to explain to us, about how evil works, and about its inherent impregnation into the earth itself, and about the deterioration and decay of what is beautiful. Martin doesn't have any of that. All he has is human cruelty, human behavior at its worst, dragons to enforce that human behavior, which, again, I'm always going to love dragons. That's the only reason I watched The Hobbit, because I wanted to see how they were going to depict Smaug, And I already forgot it. The dragons in Game of Thrones, in this storyline, is the only thing I do like. I do like the names, although it reminds me a lot of Skyrim, because like Vermithor makes me think of like Parthenax from like Skyrim, So, I do like the dragons. I do feel the dragons are depicted the way they should be depicted. They are these these fantastical beasts that are unbounded, They're not held by any moral or belief or anything. I think if they had made them speak like Smaug, it would have been a bad thing. I think it's good that they don't speak, and they don't, they're not capable of rational thought in that respect. Although I do think that is a quality they have. In Silmarillion, we do have dragons speak and have discussions and even have powers of hypnosis over people, like with Turambar. So it is a missed opportunity, but I think that's too much for this for Game of Thrones. I think as beasts that can be ridden but that cannot be controlled, this untamed. Let's say that dragons are kind of an allegory in Game of Thrones. Dragons are not meant to be pure beasts. They're meant to be beasts, kind of like the Balrogs. They are sentient, and they do have an intelligence that goes beyond the beast. But I feel that in Game of Thrones, and when you study Valyria, that the dragons really are a representation of nuclear power. They are the nuclear missiles of the show, right? Let's face it. They are nuclear missiles. If you have dragons, you can pretty much bomb the hell out of any nation and take it over or destroy it. And it's fitting that it's connected to Valyria when you connect it to Atlantis, because Atlantis obviously had that level of technology. We think we're so advanced today, but Atlantis was way more advanced than we were on both an esoteric level and a scientific level. And Martin does stay true to that conception. I'm being highly critical here. I know people love this show. I know people are now obsessed with the show again. They feel this is a return of Game of Thrones after the disaster of the series finale of Game of Thrones, and now they're going to be watching this intently. And good for you, HBO, and Eric Martin and everything. I don't agree. I feel that it is more of the same. I do feel that it is very well written. It is very well acted and performed. It is very well shot. The CG is on par with the technology of today. So they're going to give us more and more bigger dragons and more dragon fights. So that's cool. I'm all down for that. I do like the knights. The costumes are better than Rings of Power. HBO's House of the Dragon has all the trappings of a really well done TV show, but it's hollow at its heart is the problem, right? Look, I'd rather watch Peaky Blinders. Peaky Blinders has way more content that is genuine, in my opinion, for all its brutality. Gomorrah, for all its brutality, is more genuine. Better Call Saul, which is about a lawyer. You know, there's a lot of good shows out there. Even House of Cards, before they got rid of Kevin Spacey, which, you know, we know that was, you know, for what it's worth. House of Cards was really amazing. And I know it's based on the original British show from the early 90s, which I watched and was very good. But I felt House of Cards, the remake that Netflix did, for what it's worth, because it goes into American politics so well. I mean, these are all much meatier meaning like more meat to them than House of Dragon. House of Dragon is latching on to more of sensationalistic royalty squabbles. The only thing that made Game of Thrones a little better than that for me was the conception of the White Walkers, and the conception of that as an evil that was going to basically wash out all of Westeros, meant that if humanity wanted to survive, I felt the message there was, if humanity wanted to survive something bigger than itself that could destroy it, whether it's an evil like the White Walkers, or it's climate change, or it's a meteor about to rain down upon us, we need to come together and set aside our petty squabbles over thrones and over control over each other. Because that's all it is. The Iron Throne is about control. And it really shows that the Targaryens are a petty people. Because if they are from Valyria, and Valyria is meant to be Atlantis, and they are Atlanteans, you would think they would be like what Rhaenyra is here. Rhaenyra here has a moment of, I don't know if I should go into fighting, because my father taught me to hold the realm together, right? It's about holding the realm together. And whenever a royal and a monarch becomes selfish and controlling and worries about their seat rather than the realm, and forget that their purpose as a monarch is to sacrifice themselves for the realm, then we have this bullshit. that causes, by the end of this Dance of Dragons, right, the dragons are going to be all but dead, all of them, pretty much. Thousands of people have dying. Forget the royals. Forget the royals losing, also practically almost all their children. Thousands of people died for no reason in this battle over a kingship. So there is a lesson to be learned here, but I don't think that that's what they're doing. I think they're exploiting it for sensationalistic, for like, oh, watch this, let's see this drama. It's like watching the Kardashians. We're going to see these people fight each other. The thematic differences is that Game of Thrones had this greater than life. They had this greater than life battle coming up against them. And so you notice that prophecies always are like that, right? The prophecy of the winter's coming, and it's only our royal line that's going to save humanity. Fuck off. Fuck off. Okay? The book of Revelation and these type of prophecies only have power because we give them power. The power of imagination and the power of fantasy is a real thing. That's why books, remember, a pen is greater than the sword, right? The pen is mightier than the sword because ideas linger. You can kill a person and you can destroy a dynasty, but look at us. Look at these books that have survived from ancient times and how they hold a grip on our imagination. And if they hold a grip on our imagination, they hold a grip on what we think and how we live our lives. And that's the whole purpose of writing, and why writing is also under control now, and why they've used social media and weaponized it. If it was contrived, my point is that the concept is still a contrivance that is meant to appeal to our sense of religion, to our sense of like the book of Revelation is important and prophecies are important because they are fulfilled. They are self-fulfilling. All prophecies are self-fulfilling. A real prophet calls upon a real prophet. It basically just knows what human nature is and how it will progress and how all the dice and the chips are going to fall, and sees it ahead of time. And then calls it for what it is and tells people, hey, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. I mean, the concept of the Dark Ember novels was the concept that there would be gang wars created, that young people would join gangs, and now we have Antifa and we have all this stuff. So I mean, is that prophecy, or is that I just saw it coming because I saw it coming because it's so blatantly obvious to someone that actually steps back and analyzes and sees how things are playing out? So the Song of Ice and Fire is another contrivance to make us think that it's meant to make us think that there's any value in the Targaryen line. Here we have another scene where, and honestly, the Targaryens are the worst thing that ever happened to Westeros. Just like William the Conqueror was the worst thing that ever happened to the British Isles. The history of the British Isles, I think, would have been a very interesting one had William the Conqueror never happened. Had he been defeated, as he was almost very closely defeated in the Battle of Hastings, that would have been very interesting. I think it would have been awesome. But of course, the history of human tragedy is what the New Shadow talks about, right? The old evil, and knowing for what it is, that old evil is impregnated in the earth and it constantly resurges. Here's another opportunity to just kill Otto. Otto is the mastermind of all of this. He comes arrogantly and defiantly telling him what to do. And here clearly could have just burnt him with a dragon and ended it. I don't think killing Otto would have been... I don't think that killing Otto would have been as bad as it would have been to kill the kids. They're both mothers. Alicent and Rhaenyra are mothers, and they are going to feel a certain way about their kids being threatened and killed, right? No wrath. There is no greater wrath, right, than a mother scorned, than a mother that has lost her kid. She's going to do anything at that point, right? And we know this. And so that is pretty much where this ends, where we lose, um, we lose a child in the process of this, and that's gonna set off. At that point, neither Rhaenyra nor Alicent are gonna hold back. But if you killed Otto, which we have the opportunity to do in this scene, I don't think that anybody would have felt that bad. I think that they would have felt, they would have felt alarmed, but I think everyone would have agreed that Otto had to go because Otto, I mean, we had the scene in the last, or was it even in this episode, where between Otto and Alicent, where Alicent basically says, "You never gave me a chance to determine my life and what I wanted to do with it." He's like, "I made you the queen of the seven kingdoms." It's like, I didn't want to be that. I wanted to have a normal life. You made me have sex with a man older than me who was decrepit and had I mean, you got to feel bad for Alicent. She's the classic woman that was never allowed to really make her own decisions and find her own lover, find someone that she could love and cherish. She was forced upon men, and she's forced to kind of prostitute herself to men. And Otto was the one, and she's not, by this point in the story, she's not kidding herself, right? So I think if they had killed Otto at this point, again, man, it's like one of those things. It's like when you watch a horror movie, and you're like, he's waiting out. Don't go outside. He's waiting for you outside. He's gonna kill you. Grab the gun. Like all the obvious things that should have been and could have been done are conveniently skipped over by people. Like they're suddenly stupid. Like for example, we had that moment with Vaemond where Daemon cuts off his head. Like, how come you give us Daemon cutting Vaemond's head, which was obviously what needed to happen? But here, when Daemon could have done the same thing and just burned this guy to crisp, burned them all to crisp, he doesn't do it. Because it has to be made for the contrivance of the storyline. I do believe when Rhaenys did it, it made sense, right? When Rhaenys held back, it kind of made sense because Rhaenys is the odd one out in this fight. She is one who is really not involved in it. She's not going to get anything out of it. The only thing she wants is for her granddaughters to survive all of this. So it makes sense that she didn't burn them at the sept. Like there, I kind of understand her logic, and there the reasoning makes sense. But outside of that, everywhere else, there's too many opportunities in this episode alone where things should have been made, decisions should have been made that weren't made, that are going to be costly down the road. So it's a good question of like, to what extent do you hold back from doing what you know has to be done, even if it may seem cruel or ruthless, as we said, when you know it could save so many lives down the road? It is hard not to want to root for Rhaenyra in this, because the arrogance of Otto and how he approaches this so-called negotiation is so. I hate him so much. He's such a come mierda that you just can't but want to stand defiantly against any time that Otto tries to make any terms.
This is his cupbearer. Finally, the king.
And you notice how Daemon, again, observing. It is a shame. I thought that Rhaenyra understood Daemon, and I thought that they were going to partner well. And we do see in this episode that they don't. And it's not Daemon's fault. Daemon always knew what he had to be to maintain the realm. He was always faithful to his brother. He is faithful to Rhaenyra until he sees that they don't do what needs to be done, right? That they make mistakes that are going to cost down the road. And again, this is why Daemon is superior in my viewpoint.
Will pardon any knight or lord who conspired against his ascent.
And at this point, I want to say that even though when I first watched this through, I was on Rhaenyra's side, I do feel that, look, it's a game of chess, right? Like they already messed up by leaving and going to Dragonstone. They should have never left King's Landing. if they had stayed in King's Landing, they would have known that Viserys had died, and there would have been no opportunity for Otto and Alicent to place Aegon on the throne before they had a say in it, right? But okay, that was a mistake, and we can believe that mistake. She wanted to go back home. She was going to come back. Technically, Viserys died overnight, so nobody expected that to happen. But at this point in time, when Otto comes to you with this, if you're not going to literally burn Otto, and there's only two options, right? You either burn Otto and you go with the dragons in force right now, which is still going to be bad, but not as bad as waiting. In this moment, Rhaenyra should have accepted the terms, right? But then talked to Daemon and said, we need to buy ourselves time. They've already made this, they've already gone and jumped the gun, they've already done this. And the only way that I can undo this is now working surreptitiously. I need to protect my children. I need to protect my family. Open war is going to create too much calamity for the realm, which you do get a sense of that's why she's hesitating. But it should have been done already with something in mind to work with Alicent. Look, you know what? You know what? It is what it is. I don't want to be queen anyway. Fuck it. I'll let Aegon be king. Fine. You made him king already. You're an asshole, but you did it. Okay. But why don't you grant my sons something in return? You know, either my son becomes the heir after, as it was meant to be. He's a male. Or you give him lordships that are going to be, acceptable. And that way, the family stays together. We stay strong. There's no need for bloodshed. The Targaryens still have their strength and their numbers. Because if anything goes to show, anything can change at any given moment in time, right? So I do feel that the show was kind of teasing us with that, with her. And at the moment, I felt just like everybody else, because of the way Otto is, I just hate him so much that I was like, no, bitch, I am not going to do what you tell me to do. Go screw yourself and go back. But really the best option here would have been to go along with it at this point. It's too late. They played their hand well and they beat you to it. The only way you would be able to overturn is to win the lords over in your favor. And to do kind of what was the name of the guy in Game of Thrones, the eunuch? I'm blanking out on the name of the eunuch. Varys? Was it Varys? Varys was a genius, right? Because he always worked in the shadows and he always knew how to get people in position to do what needed to be done. Like with Tyrion, right? He saves Tyrion and on more than one occasion, right? Because he knew that Tyrion was important and was necessary. And in any case, we need a Varys in the show. We need a Varys desperately on the show. So this was a big mistake. By standing up to Otto and being defiant, the card was they already played their hand. You already gave up by you leaving King's Landing, knowing that your father was about to die. We all knew he was moribund and he was going to die. You have already given up your upper hand. Rings of Power did this all the time, right? Whenever the writers have to dumb down their characters in order to progress the narrative, you're cheating yourself and you're cheating the audience. And I feel that, sadly, that's what they're doing here. Rhaenyra is not this dumb. Daemon is not this dumb. They would have played their cards, I think, more intelligently. I mean, we know for a fact that after the events of the end of this episode, where Lucerys gets killed, right, with Arax, we know that Daemon sends two assassins to kill Jaehaerys, the son of Aegon, the son of Aegon, grandson of Alicent, right? They send them to kill Jaehaerys, I believe. So you're smart enough to use assassins, but you're not smart enough to bend the knee when it's necessary. If you guys ever watched There Will Be Blood, a great movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, one of the best movies ever, because he's pitted against a priest who's a piece of shit like Otto. And there's a scene where the priest kind of corners him to having to give in to him. And instead of fighting him and like, murdering the priest, I guess, which would have led him to go to jail, that would have been the end. He bends the knee and he's a fervent believer in the priest, and he says, yes, it's one of the best scenes in the show. He knew that the best move in that point in time was to give in, right? When you don't have any other options, you give in to the enemy because you're hoping that in the future you'll be able to gain advantage again. And that's what Daemon and Rhaenyra should have done in this situation. The fact that they don't means that you had to dumb down the characters, and by dumbing down the characters, you are cheapening the show. Daemon was never told by Viserys. I don't know. I guess this is a prophecy that's only passed down from king to heir, I'm assuming. Because Daemon, I thought every Targaryen knew about the Song of Ice and Fire, but apparently no. And she realizes this when she tries to talk to him about it. And he doesn't even acknowledge it and gets angry at her because, again, she's holding him back. He's the fierce dragon, and she's holding him back. And he's like, I don't understand. You married me for a reason. Because you knew I could defend you. Because you knew I could do what had to be done, no matter how ruthless. We did it with Laenor, remember? And now, when it's crucial to our survival, you're turning your back on it. He has a point. And here the miscommunication between them is where if they had failed, they failed to communicate. If they failed at their relationship, if they had bothered to communicate and work together on their relationship better, she should have talked to him about the Song of Ice and Fire long ago. Because then he would have understood where she's coming from in this discussion, and they could have come up with a better plan. She could have been like, listen. Yeah, we could grab all the dragons and burn them all to hell, and they could possibly burn all of ours to hell because they got Vhagar. Remember, we got Vhagar. You can't... Arax and Taraxes and Shrykos and Morgul and all these other dragons don't mean shit against Vhagar. You don't have... Meleys is no good against Vhagar. Vermithor is probably the closest one, And you'd have to tag team Vhagar with at least 2 or 3 dragons, if not more, to even have a chance, And everybody knew this. Remember, I said this back in the episode of Mice and Aemond when I talked about the fact that Aemond taking Vhagar was a serious problem. When they should have forbid him from having access to that dragon when he was a kid, Viserys. Because Vhagar is the big issue here. Vhagar is the wild card in all of this. It's the only reason the Hightowers got as far as they did. So you don't go up against someone that has Vhagar. It's like saying, yeah, it's like if Balerion was still available, as many dragons as you want to go up against Balerion, you're kidding yourself. You're kidding yourself. I do want to say though that I do hope the cannibal makes an appearance, even though nobody ever wrote him. Like if it was me and I had to rewrite this and I was like, fuck Martin's story, okay, just fuck Martin's story, and I was gonna rewrite this, I would have Rhaenyra get on top of Cannibal and destroy and kill Vhagar herself. I would have her tame Cannibal somehow and go at it and eliminate Vhagar. As much as it's not Vhagar's fault, I think the sad thing about the dragons too is the fact that this isn't the dragon's fault. In Tolkien, the conception of dragons is very different. They are inherently malicious. But here the dragons are just they're like horses. Yes, I would have her, if HBO wants to make this any good, right? I would have her tame Cannibal. Well, how was Daenerys the mother of dragons? I mean, how is it that Daenerys didn't get burned alive when that whole thing happened in like episode 1 or 2 of the first season of the series, when she became the mother of dragons? magic. It's kind of like, it's almost spiritual, really. I got sucked into Game of Thrones with Daenerys. I felt Daenerys was a kind of Queen Elizabeth figure, you know, like a queen to usher in a golden age, you know, a tolerant queen, but a strong one, you know. And the fact that she didn't get burned by the dragons, by the fire, I was like, it's almost like a spiritual thing. Like she's born of fire, right? Isn't that what she's called? Stormborn, I guess, or some shit like that. I don't remember anymore. But we lost all sense of that. If you wanted to redeem this show for me, you would make Rhaenyra at some point. Doesn't have to be season 2. It could be season 3. I don't care. You would have her tame cannibal and just, you know, arrasar, you know, with all of this bullshit, you know, eliminate Chris Puff, eliminate Hightower, and ride in triumphantly. Yes, give me some more drama. Let Melaise and Rhaenys die. I thought her death is a good tragedy. I like Sunfire and Aegon's, and I like how Aegon becomes more and more like Viserys, right? He becomes more and more a decrepit creature as he tries to hold on to the Iron Throne in the progress. But give me a good ending with Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra's ending is I'm so upset about it. I'm not kidding you. I'm so upset about it. Not even because it's tragic, but because it's so lame the way Martin eliminates her in the storyline. In any case, Daemon does not know about the prophecy. She knows about the prophecy. This would have been a great moment for them to rekindle and rejoin their strengths as a couple, as a royal couple, and be like, you need to trust me. You need to understand that I know what I'm talking about. Let's get the High Towers through subterfuge. Let's bend the knee now so that we can get close enough to get the North. Because the other issue that Rhaenyra and Daemon have in this trajectory of events is that the North, I don't know, how far is the North? It feels like it takes them a century to get down from the North. If the North is Scotland, right? If the North is Scotland in this world, which clearly it is, how long does it take to get down south from Scotland? Does it take fucking months? And months? It felt like it took half a year. It's because of the Starks taking so long to get their asses down south that Rhaenyra ends up losing. Because if they had come down, she had pretty much the Vale and the North on her side, and even the Iron Isles to some extent, you could say, and the Riverlands eventually, I believe, are on her side as well. Maybe not at first, but eventually. Like, she had the upper hand. She should have won all along, but they took forever to get down south. I think that would have been excellent. Listen, we need to buy ourselves time for the army from the north to get their asses down south enough to support us. So in the meantime, time is our friend. Let's swallow our pride and do this. Oh, but we have dragons. Yes, but they have Vhagar. We're fucked. If you didn't take Vhagar over in all these years from Aemond, you're not going to do it now. The only dragon that's fierce enough is Caraxes. I mean, again, dude, like, you've got Vermithor and you've got Caraxes. I'm sure that a combination of Vermithor, Caraxes, Meleys, and Syrax would have been enough to bring Vhagar down. So a lot of stupidity. They're kind of like the elves. The Targaryens are like the elves in their hubris and pride. It is the pride of the Noldor that brings them down in the end. So again, we're getting back to this concept that comes from the elites, that comes from the royal line of Britain and the royal lines of Europe, that they believe they came from somewhere else. Okay? They feel that they are not human, that they are above humanity, and that they therefore have special powers and have special dispensation over the laws of mankind. And that is very dangerous. And I think it's weird and scary that we have reached the year 2022 and we still have this, that we're still living under that. We have not thrown off the yoke of our masters, you know? But Corlys, I'm conflicted with the actor. I feel this actor is confused about his role in the show. I like him as an actor, but I feel he doesn't really understand Corlys. I feel that Corlys has not been written properly on the show compared to what I'm seeing as what his storyline, his story arc is going to be. So it's really annoying because the actor's a nice guy, but he's playing himself. Corlys is a different character, but is also not being written the way that it's just very ambiguous. But he is back, and he is going to last for a very long time in this war, sadly, because I feel that Rhaenys is much stronger than him. I feel the female characters in the show are strong women. I do. I feel they are. I am. That's another thing I do like about this show versus Galadriel and Rings of Power, and Bronwyn in Rings of Power, and what was her name? I forgot already. Mariel. These are strong women. These are women that are. They think before they leap. They know how to deal with the men that they've been dealing with. Nonetheless, there's a moment here between them where she tells him, "You abandoned me," which is true. I guess like father, like son with Laenor. You went off to go have your adventures, and meanwhile, I had to hold down the fort. Vaemond freaking rebelled and tried to take your throne, and you weren't even here to keep the. I mean, she's right.
Every man standing round the painted table urges her to plunge the realm into war. Rhaenyra is the only one who's demonstrated restraint.
I mean, and we have to agree with Rhaenys that Rhaenyra exercising restraint at this point in time is the way to go. I was debating whether it was, but after seeing how things are going to play out, again, my whole thing is that she should have exercised restraint, and she should have bent the knee and bought herself some time while she conspired to get the North, the Riverlands, and the Vale to support her, because we know for a fact that the Reach, the Stormlands, and the Westerlands were never going to support her claim. But they could have also gotten. This would have been a good opportunity to get Dorne involved. Also, by the way.
Lord Corlys.
This was a good scene. Corlys comes in, right, and he pretty much gives her support. I forgot what they end up discussing, because the whole thing about these discussions is how they're going to end up. They do approach. Rhaenyra does try to go by diplomacy, right? She does take the diplomatic approach.
Share blood with my hands, but all of them swore oaths to me.
Well, they can't really get Dorne involved because it's not until Daeron that Daeron conquers Dorne. And I'm trying to figure out who Daeron is. Daeron kind of feels like a crusader. It feels like Daeron going into Dorne is kind of appealing to, again, showing how Martin steals from European history. I feel that Daeron is a crusader. He's kind of like King Lionheart, if you remember, King Richard the Lionhearted, and then Viserys the First, which is actually the son of Rhaenyra here, is like King Henry II, that Robin Hood thing. So, because Viserys ends up getting replaced, or actually no, after Viserys we do have Aegon. He's kind of a dual character. He's like Henry II and Henry VII, so kind of wrapped in one. Because the Dance of the Dragons is pretty much the War of the Roses, right? It's the same thing as the Battle of the Houses of Houses of York and Lancaster in British royal history, which also caused a lot of devastation during that period, even though we also had Henry V during that period, who pretty much conquered France and almost took over the throne of France for a moment. If he had not died, Henry V would have become king of France as well as Britain, England, whatever.
Honor. Our houses are bound by common blood and common cause. This high tower treason cannot stand.
I will give Corlys enough to say that, you know, he did remain faithful to the end. He has an interesting story arc. But again, I don't feel that the way they wrote this character and this actor portrays him, I feel that there's something missing.
You have the full support of our fleet and house. Your Grace.
And they're very important, right? The Valerian fleet, right, is very strategic. I want to say at least here we have some strategy. We do have some strategy here where the Valerian fleet is crucial because it kind of forms a, what's the word? A blockade, so nothing can come in and out of King's Landing, and that's very crucial to the blacks, right? We have the blacks and the greens, right? Just like we had the red roses and the white roses. And the blacks' advantage throughout the Dance of the Roses, Dragons, is the fact that they have the Valerian fleet holding a blockade at between Dragonstone and Driftmark, maybe, I don't know, but they have a blockade that prevents King's Landing from getting any support from Pentos, anything coming in and out. Pretty much, they're landlocked, and that's awesome. And that's very crucial. That's the only strategic thing I will give them that they did do. And in that sense, their blood tie saved them here because everybody else pretty much betrays their oaths to Rhaenyra.
Princess Rhaenys.
I love how Rhaenyra turns to Rhaenys because she knows that it's Rhaenys really that made this happen for her. And I really love, can I say, it is so rare to see women support each other in real life, that to see how Rhaenys finally stands behind her. Remember, Rhaenys is the one that told Alicent, why don't you become queen? I think that if Alicent had listened to Rhaenys' advice and made herself queen, I think Rhaenys would have backed her up a little bit, you know? Because Rhaenys is all about, I got robbed of, and I love how Rhaenys isn't a boomer, where she's like, well, I got robbed of my opportunity, so therefore screw everybody else, you know, screw the new generation. No, she's like, I got robbed of my opportunity, but if another woman can do what I would have done, I give 100% support to her. It is a chess game, and you do need to guess the next move of your opponent. That's how you win. That's how you strike. Yeah, you're right. But certainly at this point in the game, right now where we are in the story, even in the show, the best thing would have been to give in. Don't you think? The best option would have been to just bend the knee and pretend to give in to the demands of Hightower.
If war's first stroke is to fall, it will not be by my hand.
You do not mean to act.
Taking caution does not mean standing fast. I wish to know who my allies are before I send them to war.
So we do see that she is a capable leader. Nothing at all like what you're telling me in the book, where she's this spoiled brat, the darling of the realm. Goes to show how unimaginative Martin is, and what a poor opinion he has of women. Can we say he's sexist? I think he's kind of sexist. Why in the hell would you send Lucerys there when you know, on top of everything else, that Aemon has been wanting to get at Lucerys since the day he lost his eye? So this was stupid. Like, again, are we dumbing down the characters?
Dragons can fly faster than ravens, and they're more convincing.
Dragons are convincing, but not when you have Vhagar. I can't stand that kind of shit. Like, you're making the characters dumber than they are so that you can progress something. Before they had to kill characters off to progress the storyline. And now to progress the storyline, they have to make characters stupid.
We must remind these lords of the oaths they swore.
They're almost really more like tarot card, arcana cards that embody different factors of life, you know, like the stranger and death and the maiden and virginhood and the crone and all that crap. This is all really this is all really witchcraft stuff, but that's also based on esoteric understandings of creation. They swear on the book. Aegon the Conqueror was successful, unlike the one that came after, like his son Aenys, and even Maglor the Cruel, if I'm saying it right, I don't know. Because he understood that he needed to be, if he was going to be king of Westeros, and this is the same thing that to some extent William the Conqueror and the Normans did as well, even though they imposed Norman, which is French derived culture, onto England, they still had to respect some of the traditions and cultures of England, right? So in the case of Westeros, right, they're kings under the seven. In the case of Westeros, they have banners. The Targaryens did not have banners prior to coming from Old Valyria. And also, obviously, they don't worship either the old gods of the north or the seven. But Aegon adopted the banner that they have, right? Maegor, thank you. He adopted the banner with the 3 dragons to be like the Westeros Sea. And he went to the, Old Town? The Citadel? He went to the Citadel to bow down to their gods and to their priest, and to be anointed as a king in their tradition and their religion. So obviously, I guess this scene is meant to evoke that reality that the Targaryens, to be successful as kings in strange lands, as it were, they have had to adopt the cultures and the trappings of the local people.
You must answer.
So that's cool. We get the sense that Jacaerys is respectful of his mom, but he wants to do his own thing. This is typical young youth thing. I don't think it's gonna end well for him.
Thank you.
But I do feel that these characters, for example, Jacaerys, is a much more clearly defined character, like unlike Corlys, in the way that they're writing and depicting, and it's personified. Like, this kid knows what he's doing. William Rufus, the son of William the Conqueror, had, of course, did not get along with his brother. I think it was Robert, if I remember. I was just looking at it the other day. And didn't get along with Henry. And the King of Scotland, I forgot the name right now, they did end up allying many times the Normans, right, that took over England, many times did ally themselves with the Scottish kings to get their support against their own family members that were trying to take over the throne. Because that happened a lot, especially after William the Conqueror. It's interesting that we did not have so much of that with the Saxons. Again, they didn't have a high king that I remember, but they respected each other, and they did have a council. The Saxons were great disciplinarians and administrators. The Normans just came and took that over. I mean, we don't even know where the Normans come from, folks. Supposedly they come from Scandinavia, but they could be one of the lost tribes of Israel for all we know. In any case, this is kind of the same thing here, where the Targaryens are appealing to Cregan Stark the same way that William's line, the Normans, appealed to the Scottish for support. More history ripoff. It's interesting to understand how Aegon conquered Westeros, because again, how it lines up with Britain, where the Riverlands, the Riverlands, Storm's End, and the Reach, all of them, their current houses that are in charge are usurpers. Because in Storm's End, they killed the Dondarrion, I think it was. And then Baratheon took over just because Onis Baratheon supported Aegon. So they're not even the true kings of that land. You see what I'm saying? So it makes sense that the Baratheons are always so... they're usurpers, right? They're not legit. They're there because Aegon the Conqueror put them there. And this is where the Targaryens fucked themselves in the ass. Riverland, same thing, right? They killed Horse, that evil guy, and they installed shit, I forgot who they installed. Was it the Tullys? I don't remember right now. Tarleys? I don't remember. And then in the Reach, the same thing happened, right? The Gardeners die. I forget why right now. And then they put in the Tarleys. The Tarleys are in the Reach. My bad. And the Tarleys were like the stewards of the Gardeners. So they're not really either the original kings. And Tarleys always seemed very suspicious to me in Game of Thrones. So it's an interesting point, you know.
Proud man. He will be honoured to host a prince of the realm and his dragon.
I did like this scene where Daemon finds this dragon. He's kind of singing to the dragon. Really, I enjoy scenes like this where there really isn't a whole lot of talking, where it's more visual, where it's more about performance than I do when they have a lot of talking in general, and just in general in film and TV. This is what it should be like, right? You convey so much more and you give so much more of a sense of environment and of a sense of a moment this way than you do by having people talk. He's singing to the dragon, so it's like he's lulling it awake from a deep sleep. And the question is, which dragon is it? At first, I was hoping it was the cannibal, but it's more likely Vermithor, right? So the question is, why is he, you know, he's already got Caraxes, so he's not going to be flying this dragon. Why is he waking him up, right? And it's a really awesome introduction to this dragon. It's a really good introduction to the dragon, right? But it's unclear on purpose why this dragon, what dragon it is. It's probably Vermithor. And we do know that, I guess, the dragon seeds are going to appear, but at this point it's unclear. But it does feel like he's got a plan in mind, you know? He's got a plan in mind, and yeah, this definitely looks like Vermithor, right? Yeah, this is why we love dragons. So if you're going to go to someone because you're not sure if they're faithful to you and you want to make sure that they are on your side, you have to have something on the table, right? Either whether you buy them with money or gold, which isn't always the best, but the best way is always to offer a marriage so that that house feels like they have a continuity to look forward to, right? That's also been the theme of House of the Dragon season 1 from the beginning, and it's very realistic. Why do you send Lucerys when Lucerys is betrothed already without offering some kind of a marriage? Maybe he could have said, again, Rhaenyra could have said, offer Aegon, my little Aegon or little Viserys. They're little. They can be married to one of your daughters when they come of age. You know? How come the Greens thought of that? So I don't know. Again, dumbing down characters to progress the storyline. Oh, this is a great view. The moment I saw Vhagar, I would have got back on my... That should have, again... And I guess, I mean, Lucerys is a little kid, so he's, you know, whatever. But if I see Vhagar there, the first thing I do is I get back on my dragon and I fly my ass home. And I tell Mom, Vhagar is there. We are fucked. We do not have the Baratheons. End of story, right? There's nothing else to be said the moment you see Vhagar just chilling in the background like a freaking giant dinosaur. And And you know that Aemond, I thought Aemond wanted to kill him, but clearly Aemond just wants to take his eye out. We finally see the exposed sapphire in his eye. That was kind of cool. I don't know what the significance of that is. Maybe you can tell me. But it is kind of cool. It also evokes Viserys towards the end. Remember when he lost his eye? But instead of putting a jewel in there, Viserys covered it up, which I think goes to show a little bit of the humility and the difference. I do not like Baratheon. He's a piece of shit. I've never liked the Baratheons. They always seem to be the trump card in everything. Storm's End always seems to be a big problem in Westeros.
Where's the bloody maester?
You come in and you see that this guy is basically saying, do you have something to offer me? And you see Aemond there, you got to get the hell out of there. Right? Like the whole time I'm like, you got to get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of there. And I didn't even think, look at these beautiful ladies. Oh my goodness. Flying into the face of danger and certain death with no plan. I thought that Baratheon was not going to step in, because that's another thing. In all the other times that we've seen people attack each other on the show, no one ever steps in. They let them do their thing, and they let them fight each other and punch each other in the face and kill each other off, and nobody says anything. But then all of a sudden Baratheon stops it, and I thought that was weird. Oh, there we go. The eye reveal. So Baratheon stops him. This is too long. Oh, we kind of missed it. But in any case, he stops him, right?
The boy came as an envoy. I'll not have blood shed beneath my roof.
Since when? There's always been bloodshed beneath their roofs. Why do we suddenly stop a bloodshed duel? It feels like the entire show we've allowed duels to happen in halls all the fucking time. They're always fighting each other and nobody says anything. We had literally a little boy cut down a guy way back when Rhaenyra was young, remember? And she was trying to find a suitor. And the little boy cut that guy down like in front of... Nobody stopped the boy. Why are they stopping these two from fighting? If anything, I would have thought Baratheon would laugh and be like, well, let's see who wins. And if the boy manages to cut Aemon down, which, you know, we know he wouldn't, then I'll support Rhaenyra. You know, the age gap in this is a little bit unfair. Can we say that? Like, we do see, again, going back to how these shows abuse children. The age gap makes things unfair on this show. Like, people that are old, like Aemond couldn't fight Daemon because Daemon is older than him. And then now Lucerys can't really have a fair fight with Aemond because Aemond is older than him. Like, they're mismatched. So it's not fair. And these children are put into situations that children really shouldn't be put into. Now, again, I know that in medieval times that would happen all the time. We had 10-year-old kings, you know. That doesn't mean that was good. And I get it, but it really hinders the story, because here we could have had a really cool duel fight. If this had been a duel fight between the two of them, I almost would have liked it better than just them flying off with dragons and then he rips the kid's dragon in half. It would have been more honorable, at least. It would have been more fun. I mean, one of the best parts of Hamlet is when they have the duel scene at the end, right? It's such an amazing moment. Like, why would you cheat us of a duel? You know? And I mean, I get it that for the story, this kid has to die in the way that he dies. But, nonetheless, this is something where the adaptation, because it's George Martin, this is something where this isn't Tolkien. This isn't really this lore isn't all that, and the writer is still alive, So you can consult the writer if you really wanted to. We really would benefit from we really would benefit from treating the source material as a jumping off point for something better. I feel like there's a lot of room for improvement in the story as it is in Fire and Blood. That sticking too much to the source material on this one does not benefit the show. Like, the show would do better from it deviating from the source material in certain key moments like this one. You know what I mean? Nonetheless, this scene is fun because we get to see dragons, and we get to, you know, we get to CG, we get to appreciate the moment of the dragons being depicted and being shown to us, and that Vhagar is so huge. We knew that there was no way that this kid could, you know, that Arrax could go up against Vhagar. But also, the interesting thing that we see is that the dragon riders, as Viserys had already told Rhaenyra several episodes back, the dragon riders don't really have control of their dragons, right? They have a kind of symbiotic connection, a kind of spiritual connection, a kind of karmic, almost animalistic connection to their mounts, to their dragon mounts, but they don't control them. So when Arrax in this sequence obviously gets nervous that huge Vhagar is chasing after it, and probably Arrax does not understand why it's being chased because it's a beast. Here, I think it would have benefited from dragons being able to actually communicate with the riders. It attacks Vhagar in a moment of desperation, which is stupid, but it does it because it's a beast, and Vhagar then obviously reacts. He's in the clear. Nope. Oh! He's in the clear. Oh my god! If there wasn't a little boy on that mount, I wouldn't feel so horrible. They fell in love with the image of the huge figure appearing out of the cloudy dimness. That's why they did it, the visual. Okay. Okay. It's obviously, the implications here obviously are very dire. Aemon does give us a good feeling for that, good acting on that. Let's see if we can get to that where he's like, "Oh my god, what did I just fucking do?" Like, even for Aemon, he knew that he crossed the line there, right? Even he knew, like, now this has become personal, right? This is no longer about kids fucking around and being assholes to each other. This is no longer about, you know, mommy and daddy are fighting over the Iron Throne. There was no real threat to anybody up until this point. But now you've killed a mother's son, and she is going to react. And that's why it's important for us to be able to see that final moment of Rhaenyra, right? Because she has tried so hard to be the good person. We can say that Alicent has as well. I'm not going to hate on her. But in this very moment, Aemon, even though we know that Aemon is going to embrace, right? He may know, he may have fucked up here, but he's going to embrace his fuck up. He's going to say, okay, well, I embrace it. If it means I got to kill every single one of the blacks, I'm going to kill every single one of the blacks, right? But in this very moment, you really feel that anxiety of like, holy shit, you know, what am I going to do now? And so we have the final scene, final moment with Daemon coming up to Rhaenyra while they're still... Right, we know what they're going to talk about, and we're really waiting to see her face, because it's all about Rhaenyra's face. We don't even care about anybody else's face at this point. But it's like the miscarriage. Notice her positioning and how she's holding herself. It's just like, to her, it's still her baby, right? It's just as painful as as that miscarriage that she already had. So what do we have there? Do we think she's going to hold back now? Do we think that she's going to try to protect the realm? Do we think that she is going to be prudent? No. No, it's all no holds barred now, right? So, you know, from the perspective of the writing, yeah, they screwed with the mom. I mean, and anybody knows, like, I don't know if you guys paid attention when there was the shooting at the school here in America and in Texas. And there were, the cops were, I mean, we're not going to get into the politics of it, but just the cops weren't allowing anybody to go in. And this mother was like, fuck you guys. She ran in there. She figured out a way to get in. She got her son and she got out. Like, she was not having it that her son was about to be possibly shot. She didn't care that she didn't have a weapon. She didn't care that the cops were actively preventing her from getting to her son. She got her son. Like, you know, that's a mom, man. That's how a mom feels for her child, you know, and that's pretty serious. So, and here we have two of them. So we know it's going to be brutal. So, anyway, I think I've given plenty of evidence as to the show is well done. The show is well crafted. They've got the money. They've got the professionals. You know, it's well done. Okay. But it's also dumbed down. It's also contrived. It also requires really fake things to happen for the plot to move forward. Here's the thing too about these stupid shows is that they really dehumanize us, right? From the standpoint of a spectator watching this, right? For us, it's like, oh, yeah, I want to see more destruction, death, and mayhem. But if you really try to put yourself in the shoes of the people in the story, would you want that? No. You would want a queen or a king that's going to exercise restraint, is going to think about your children, you know, your survivability of all this, and is going to try to come up with a peaceful resolution, or as peaceful as possible. It's like our politicians right now wanting to go to war with Russia, knowing they have nuclear missiles and acting as if it's inevitable. And it is inevitable. Inevitable. I know it's not what I'd want, and that's what Rhaenyra was going to do. She was considering Alicent's proposal, but Aemon fucked up. Yeah, I know. And this is one of those things and that's realistic, where circumstances happen. You know, shit happens, and then it changes the trajectory of things. But throughout this episode, first of all, never should have sent Lucerys over there, right? Like, never should have sent Lucerys over there. Why didn't you kill Otto when he came over? You know, why didn't, Rhaenys, I'll give her a pass. I'm not killing them in the Sept. Why didn't you accept, if you're not going to kill Warfooting, yeah? If you're not going to kill Otto, why not accept his terms and play the cuck until you are able to get more support on your side? Because if the people support you, then you can dethrone Aegon anyway. You were the realm's darling. You were the one that the king publicly, time and time again, asserted as his heir, no matter what. Alicent saying that he changed his mind on the deathbed means nothing, which we saw with that old man that got killed by Sir Chris Puff. There were many moments in this episode where things could have gone a completely different way if any of these characters were not complete idiots, which suddenly in this episode they become idiots. It doesn't equate for me. And then on top of all of that, we have a storyline that is predicated. It could have been interesting if it was about a queen, showing us women that are level-headed and can bring a conclusion to something that men would otherwise have screwed up. And instead, it's becoming a squabble between two women where they don't care who they destroy. And we're forced into this paradigm of royalty, racial worship, which is disgusting, irrelevant, unnecessary, and it's meant to provoke not so much those of us who are now older, but it's meant to evoke that in younger kids. It's meant to evoke that in the youth. It's meant to evoke the concept of the cruelty as the only way. The answer needs to be restraint and diplomacy and figuring out how to buy yourself time while you manipulate the cards to stack in the right direction. We are seeing that now with politics, where the people in charge have been using us against each other for the longest time, have been pitting left against right, but now it's become about children, and it's become about survivability for people, and people are reacting and voting, at least in this country, in a way that they see is going to protect the realm, as it were, is going to give them an opportunity at survivability. They don't want it to go to pieces. They don't want it to go get shot to hell because the people in charge want it to get shot to hell. And I feel that's an important message. And we're not going to get that here. We're going to get here, like you're saying, I guess, war footing, that we need a daemon, right? We need someone that is always ready to fight, that is always ready to understand where how the enemy is thinking, and is willing to do what needs to be done. But we need a Rhaenyra that's going to also weigh the consequences and look for alternatives, even when you lose your child. You know what I mean? Even because there's going to be many children lost in all of this. I know it's become personal, and this is the problem with humanity, that it always becomes personal, and that we don't yeah, well, I mean, I do believe that the King Arthurian type of rule and nobility is worth something, but when it's used and abused by tyrants like this, who use the position of a king to mean that they are gods and that they can do whatever they want, we got a problem, right? I mean, that's why we forced the Magna Carta upon the kingship of Britain. Before this was like in the 1200s. This was like pretty early on in medieval times. We decided we don't want someone like the Targaryens. And this is a show about Targaryen worship, and that's why I'm against it. I don't like it, like I was saying. Briefly, we already talked a lot. I already kind of snuck in a lot of the similarities and the parallels that Martin is drawing between this and British history, medieval history. We have Aegon the Conqueror is William the Conqueror, incest. The dragons are like a nuclear power that represents a power that's coming from ancient times, right? The Valyrians are clearly Atlanteans who have a technology and an understanding of esoteric practices that we no longer do. The Targaryens are not a royal line, interestingly enough. They are the least noble of the Valyrians, yet they seem to have positioned themselves to become, the de facto rulers of the world, or at least of Westeros, because Essos is still too big for them to conquer, it seems. Even though the Valyrians had conquered Essos, and Westeros was just a wild land, just like Rome in that respect, had conquered everything but Britain for the most part until Claudius, and even then. After Aegon, we have an immediate weak king, followed by an infight within the royal line, just like with William, Rufus, and Henry II, that ended up leading us eventually to the War of the Roses. You could say maybe that Richard II is like Viserys. He was a weak king. He's known, and I'm spitballing here. I haven't really gone into deep revision or review of British royal history, but clearly the Dance of the Dragons that results from Viserys's weakness is the same as the War of the Houses. We have the greens and the blacks, like we have the red and the white roses of that war that lasted way too long until Henry VII, who unifies the houses and creates the House of Tudor. And the House of Tudor really was never really legitimate, right? It's a questionable house that kind of eased its way in and then claimed kingship back to the Celtic kings like Bryn Mawr. But nonetheless, the Tudors take over. So just like we had Aegon, you could say we had Aegon II, that was tragic. We had Aegon III, who was a very young king, kind of like Edward VII, but that's after Henry anyway. But it evokes a lot of these things, right? And then we have Daeron, who seems like King Lionheart, Baelor, who seems like Julian the Apostate, and then Viserys, who feels like Henry, the brother of Lionheart, who was so bad that they had to force the Magna Carta down his throat. And then we have Aegon IV, who's clearly Henry Tudor, Henry VIII, who screws over pretty much the royal line by legitimizing his bastard children. And we know that Henry Tudor created a lot of issues with his bastards and the Church of England. And even though that, in my opinion, was a good departure, in the end, I think the Church of England was a good departure, even though it was created for selfish reasons, which gave us Queen Elizabeth. Sadly, we will not get a Queen Elizabeth. Sadly, the Targaryens never have a queen. But then we have the Blackfire rebellions, which I can't really talk about right now because I haven't really delved into it. But so far, it pretty much mimics the British royal history. If we go back to Valyria, the Valyrians were nothing special. They were they were people that lived around volcanoes. I don't know why he uses 14 volcanoes when usually the magic number is 13. I'm not sure why 14. They somehow discovered dragons and learned how to tame them. There's a big emphasis on occult practices, witchcraft, which is big in the elite. John Todd talked about it big time. I think I've mentioned him before. And they basically formed the equivalence of what was the Roman Republic in a way, where they had a lot of noble houses jockeying for power in the Senate and backstabbing each other, and some houses were more stronger than others, but there was no king, as it were. The Valyrians also, just like Philip the Magnanimous, I need to learn more about Philip the Magnanimous. I am at a loss. He had 10 legitimate kids with his first wife and blackmailed Martin Luther into supporting his bigamy to have 10 more with a second wife. Jesus Christ. You see what I'm saying? This is the problem with kingship as a power play rather than as an office. You know what I mean? If kings were forced to be like abdicate after a certain amount of years, I think things would be better with kingship. Like we had that with Marcus Aurelius, where the emperors before him did not choose emperors based on lineage and bloodline, but based on qualifications. And that's how Marcus Aurelius became emperor of Rome. But then Commodus took over, and that was his son, and that was a tragedy, right? So we do see how it can work, where if the king appoints, kind of like really like Viserys. I mean, I know Rhaenyra is his daughter, but he appointed Rhaenyra versus Aegon because he felt that she was going to be a better ruler. And the more he got to learn about his daughter, the more he saw that she was a good candidate to be a ruler, right? And we see that when kings choose their heirs, the inheritors to the throne based on qualifications rather than just based on bloodline, we do have a better transition and a better consequent reign. In any case, going back to the Valyrians, they are like the Roman houses of the Republic. They are based on slavery, just like Rome. Even though they take over basically what is old ancient Egypt with old geese, and even though old geese also was based on slavery, they do exactly the same thing, bring slaves back to Valyria to mine the volcanoes for gold. It is unclear why gold is important, but gold has a very significant historical importance in our own history, not just as something of value, but of something that the ancients saw was a useful metal for some reason, and that is scarce. So the Valyrians conquer the world with their dragons, with their technology, their magic, as it were. They have slaves, they subject people to slavery, and that seems to be the beginning of their downfall. And they are like worse than our own politicians in how the different houses are backstabbing each other. And of course, there's a stupid prophecy that the gold of Casterly Rock is going to bring the doom of Valyria, which is neither here nor there. But supposedly, there is a the Lannisters or whoever was in charge of Casterly Rock during the time of Valyria wanted to buy Valyrian steel. Valyrian steel was obviously very precious in the ancient world, and there's one in the Kingdom of the North, and I forget there's another king in Westeros that has Valyrian steel. It's a big deal. So Casterly Rock wanted to buy Valyrian steel from someone, we don't know who, in Valyria, and supposedly maybe that gold that was used to buy that was used to backstab somebody. Nonetheless, the volcanoes erupt, kind of like Atlantis had the flood, which was a watery deluge. Here we create a fiery deluge. That's not oxymoron there, but we have a fiery doom when the 14 volcanoes erupt, destroying Valyria in less than a day. Supposedly Daenerys Targaryen had a vision of that. It seems very unlikely. It seems kind of bullshit to me. But she had a vision that it would happen, so the Targaryens moved to Dragonstone. Prior to that, they were not one of the major houses. They weren't even one of the major houses jockeying for power. So they were a relatively minor house in the time of Valyria. However, they were dragon riders. And I think it was Aegon's grandfather or great-grandfather that Galadriel will still have her eyebrows. Yeah, I mean... she's not gonna... she's inviolable, right? But Aegon, father or grandfather, brought 5 dragons, and the only one that survived was Balerion. Volcano-proof. Yes, she's volcano-proof. She should have been in Valyria. She would have helped them out, right? And they would have had an encampment magically somewhere. So what is the point of all that? So Valyria gets destroyed, and it's unclear, right? It's unclear whether the faceless men that we have in Game of Thrones, well, we know they existed and that they were mercenaries even in that time. And that they were born of the slaves that were in those volcanoes, rugging it out. That could not have been a good life, right? So it could be that the slaves formed this little cult of mercenaries so that they could assassinate these houses the way it happened in Rome. A good show is Rome, even though it's got canceled after the 2nd season, tragically, because it really went into a lot of the way the Roman noble houses screwed each other over back when it was still a republic, right before Julius Caesar. Sadly, I think it got too much political when it started talking about the Jewish rebellions in Judea against the Romans and the coming of the Son of Man, Jesus. So they kind of cut it out there, I think. But it would have been really interesting from a historical analysis perspective to have gone deeper into it, because it's very much like what we see here. And I think it's always been the case where I find it very interesting how powerful houses that are political get to a point of of power hunger and supremacy that they sow the seeds of their own doom, which is what we have in America today. Maybe Europe as well, but definitely in America. These houses of powerful people in this country are so hungry for power and for complete domination and for crushing any opposition and any vestige of freedom and rights and right to self-defense and right to choose, that they are willing to destroy the country itself and themselves with it. And this is what happens in Valyria, which is what happened in Atlantis. And it's interesting that's why I find it interesting and I wanted to discuss it. The only thing I find interesting about all of this, really, and I had a sense of it because I knew Valyria was going to be based on Atlantis and based on, ancient Rome. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned because we are repeating history. It's so predictable. You can write a prophecy book. You could write a book of Revelation over it. It's so predictable. Because basically these prophecies are self-fulfilling, and they are also a map of what the elite want to happen. The elite want destruction, right? They don't want 9 billion people on the planet. They want people to die of fentanyl. They want people to die of COVID. They want people to die of the vaccine. They want people to die of anything, of murdering each other, attacking each other, screwing each other over, starvation, freezing to death coming in this winter coming up because we don't have gas anymore because we can't deal with Russia. So they have no problem destroying humanity, as it were, because they feel they are above humanity and that they have bunkers that they can go protect themselves in if they want to. And they use fear, and they use coercion, manipulation, blackmail, and extortion to get everybody else in line that is in the media, is in any kind of position of influence, let's say. Which is why we have so many desperate influencers, as they're called, who are desperate not just to make it because they want money, but because they want to be in the inner circle. And when we get into The Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis, we really get a clear picture of how that works, which is why I got the books for us to read. But back to Valyria. It seems that the slaves form the faceless men mercenaries that possibly not only execute assassinations against the noble houses of Valyria, but also do something in the volcanoes to maybe cause them to erupt, knowing it will cause a destruction, because we know many people that ended up escaping from Valyria go and found Bravos, and I don't know much more beyond that, but that's one aspect of it, right? And they destroy themselves, and in 1 second, everything is over, right? And it's the same thing that could happen in America. In 1 second, I mean, at this point, it's not imaginable. It's not beyond our imagination to see that it won't take much. Dug a trench and opened a dam, did they? Yeah, right? Suddenly it feels a lot like Rings of Power, too, where the volcano erupts because they dug a trench and then they pour a body of water into it, for what it's worth. Also, it's possible the Targaryens did it on purpose. That it was a Targaryen plot to come up top. Meaning, if the Targaryens were such a low house in the time of Valyria, which they were, and they were desperate for that power more than anybody, which would make them the most evil, yet surviving, house of that already pretty much evil civilization for all its power and opulence and all that, then it means that they purposely set it up. They moved themselves to Dragonstone, knowing that, Valyria was going to have to be destroyed. They set up the destruction and the assassinations that would happen in Valyria. And they took the dragons that they thought they would need to survive and ultimately become the ruling power of the world. So that they ultimately felt they would inherit dominion over the entire planet by playing this card which required the destruction of Valyria. And I don't think that's a far stretch for the Targaryens. It is just as ridiculous, but I think it goes to show, right? I mean, in Middle Earth we have different, because we're dealing with elemental powers, like where a Morgoth and a Sauron could control a volcano, right? But human beings or even elves are not capable of such a thing. So you're just setting hell upon Earth. But again, it's how blinded they are by their lust for dominion and power. And there's something wrong with the Targaryens yet, and with the Valyrians as a race, right? There's nothing really of value that we can look back to say, wow, no, they oppressed human beings. They made them slaves. They used, you could say, abused dragons. And then they used some kind of sorcery that is left, they don't delve into. It's left undescribed, to set spells on people, to manipulate each other, and to achieve a level of, you could say, stolen technology and opulence that they otherwise, without the dragons and without this sorcery, would not ever have been able to achieve. And they did nothing to uplift humankind with it. What are we going to expect with one of the worst houses that came out of there, called the Targaryens? Yet the Targaryens are depicted as people that come to this new land of lesser men, right? And civilize them and bring unity to them, which to some extent they did, and need to be worshipped as kings, as god kings, the way the pharaohs were. So this is where I have serious problems with the show, with the entire mythology, and where I am so sick and tired of seeing evil characters being propped up as something that we should root for. If the entire Targaryen line goes to shit, all the better for Westeros. Westeros should want to destroy the Targaryens, should want to destroy the dragons, which we do see that. I hate to say that, because I do love dragons, and I do feel that they hold an interesting place in mythos, but they should be seen as a power to be reckoned with. But they shouldn't, necessarily be seen as bad as the Targaryens. I really think the Targaryens and the worship, the royal racial worship that this show and that those books is encouraging us to have, is destructive. I'm tired of it. It's not uplifting to the soul. It brings more depression upon us, because we can see in the Targaryens what we see in our politicians and in the people of power and influence around us. And we fail to then see that we can stand together, that we do have a voice, that when people want to preserve their lives and preserve their culture and preserve their values, we have avenues to do so that have been given to us through sacrifice and strife. There's an element of sacrifice, and there's an element of strife, and there's an element of battle, but there's also an element of democratic means. Yes, reflecting the modern world we live in today. That's the Master's conspiracy to destroy all magic and the Targaryen. I'm not following the Master's conspiracy. I don't know if you're referring to something in the books. That's why when I'm seeing everybody say, oh, this show is excellent, it's not excellent. It's subversive. I would rather watch Peaky Blinders. I would rather watch Better Call Saul. I would rather watch Gomorrah. Again, for the 5th time, Gomorrah is great. There's a lot of shows out there that show you the cruelty of humanity and the disparaging behaviors, the frailty of humanity, without selling us short on the possibility of goodness, right? Remembering when the Masters was healing Viserys. Yeah. Interesting, yeah. But my problem with Game of Thrones is that it baits me, and it baits people like me to think that Daenerys can be a great queen, Rhaenyra can be a great queen, that that the spirituality that they possibly could represent, the masters see what the problem is, and they want to eradicate it in exchange for science. Yeah, but I have a problem with science because, as we've seen now in the last 2 years, science can be a religion in and of itself, sadly. You're right. You're right. George Martin does not have it in him. And anyway, that's my criticism. I mean, we can watch it and we can admire the drama and the dragons, and that's all fair and good. But we're not going to get anything that's going to sustain our soul. And I feel that when you get older, when you're younger, yeah, this stuff is fun. But when you get older and you have already suffered so much in your life and you already have seen the worst in humanity, the whole point, to Tolkien's even credit, is the escapism factor, which is you want to escape into something that could be better. What if people had made a different decision? What if Harold Godwinson had won the Battle of Hastings instead of William the Conqueror? What if the King of the North had deposed Aegon the Conqueror instead of the shit? Why do we always have to constantly give our energy and our focus and our attention on negativity? That's how they stay in power. That's how the prophecy of the book of Revelation and these other prophecies become self-fulfilling. In any case, that's my thoughts on this and why I feel it's a ripoff of ancient history. It's unimaginative. But it's fun. And what else do we got, right? We don't have a whole lot more than GOT. There isn't a lot of good TV. There is good TV out there, don't get me wrong. Again, I want to watch Better Call Saul. I have to see the last season of that, the last season of Peaky Blinders. Even Cobra Kai is a good show. Even Cobra Kai, which is kind of silly with the karate stuff for kids, it's got good values. It's got good stuff that it's sharing there, and that's popular. Game of Thrones just feels like it's a never-ending descent into despair, and I don't like that. I can watch it as this way to analyze it for everybody, but I refuse to care at this point. I refuse to care about Daemon, Aemon, Rhaenyra, none of these characters that I know are going to betray my sensibility to them, So that's that. I still have 3 more parts to the new Shadow that I have to upload that I'm working on. One Punch Man S3 is confirmed. One Punch Man. I have not watched One Punch Man, so you'll have to. I'll have to look into it, because if it's good, I'll check it out. I haven't been watching a whole lot of anything. I watched this. I watched Rings of Power lately. Like I said, there's some shows I want to get back into in my time, because I still got to do my writing that I haven't been doing. And I want to really get into that story from the Unfinished Tales for y'all. And I want to get into finishing the new Shadow so you guys can see there's a lot of value in the new Shadow that people can benefit from more than this show. And oh yeah, okay, spoof, kind of funny. Okay, I'm all for it. I mean, I always loved I'm blanking out right now. Kick-Ass, even though that probably has nothing to do with One Punch Man, but Kick-Ass was funny to me, and I was always upset that there wasn't a third sequel, and now I wouldn't want to see a sequel because now everything just sucks. Unfinished Tales, and then we really got to delve into what leads to that hideous strength, because again, it goes into the deeper conspiracy theories about how this all works, and I've dropped a lot of little nuggets of spoilers of what I see. Oh, we got to watch Encanto though. I know, because I'm going to be going to that show. My sister's working on the live show of Encanto, and I'm going to go see that with Mom. Even that is better, I guess. Something nice, Not all this negativity. Like, even that's Walking Dead. Like, once they took Rick off Walking Dead, I really couldn't. I really watched it for that actor because he was so evocative. Sometimes an actor does make the show. Like, I do feel like Matt Smith makes this show. Patty Considine made this show. There's that kind of master and squire. Oh, okay. I do like that. I do like that stuff. So anyway, but we do have to get into that Hideous Strengths, the space trilogy. I still haven't looked into Gene Wolfe. I'm going to do that as well because that seems really interesting to break down. And there's that really cool story from Unfinished Tales. Not to mention, I've never finished my stories that I had gotten from Tolkien. I had read Beren and Luthien, but I never got to do The Fall of Gondolin or Hurin and His Children, which I know you referenced Hurin a lot, which was fun. But yeah, this is what I think about Game of Thrones and where it's at. I don't know how long till the next season. It is good stuff. It is compelling stuff. But I am not going to. Give a shit beyond just watching it for the sake of analysis, like I did with Rings of Power. Like, I don't know if you guys heard that they got rid of the writers for Rings of Power. Hopefully they did, and that wasn't just a rumor. Because man, maybe we can get a better season 2. Because I mean, that was just too much to even give a damn about watching season 2, right? I mean, it was too much. I think they got rid of him. I mean, I heard they got rid of him, but I don't know. I don't believe it until I get verification. Yeah, and we've spent a lot of time today. Saki is still going to have a problem. It's still going to be a problem. Sulk. I don't know. But yeah. Signed up to subversive agendas. Oh, good Lord, you know. Yeah, I know. I saw the whole thing about Bezos too and his son, and I think maybe that's why, if it is true, maybe Bezos. It just goes to show. Oh, I don't know her. She's the Amazon Studios head. Oh Lord. But Bezos is the #1 person, so maybe he can trump it. I don't know. Honestly, I don't care. I think we have a lot better material that we can explore and will explore with C.S. Lewis, with more of the Tolkien stuff, with Gene Wolfe, with getting into the Matrix, and what was the other movie? There Will Be Blood. We should get into that one. Where what I like is the analysis of these conceptions, because we get at the root of what's really going on in our world in terms of how it relates to ancient history, not so much in terms of the modern world we live in today. Like, I like Valyria and the conception of Valyria because it remains kind of true to the racial royal conspiracy, right? And which is what my focus in analyzing Game of Thrones is. They're the only reason George Martin. It's just like with Tolkien himself. In that sense, like I told you, I think C.S. Lewis was better with Aslan. By giving us Aslan, he gave us much more than Tolkien did with Iluvatar, who we really don't have anything. Maybe Gandalf, but really Aslan is a much better character than any character in fantasy writing, in my opinion. Even though it has its limitations. George Martin, Tolkien, Rowling, these writers were not. It's not coincidence they got this big. There's something behind them, and there's something behind what they were told to write and how they wrote it. I think that with Tolkien, he did rebel a little bit and saw, as we saw with The New Shadow, he saw that, there's something else going on here that I need to expose. But C.S. Lewis did that in his space trilogy before he even began then working on Narnia. And I do feel that for that, there's something to be said that's of value there. George MacDonald with Lilith, who is the predecessor of both C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, also a writer worth our discussion, because I feel he's the closest to getting into metaphysical aspects of creation and how Christianity can fit into that. Christianity in the sense of the figure of the Son of Man, not in the sense of religion, because again, that's a whole other topic of discussion when we talk about the Vatican and how Catholicism took over something, hijacked, let's say, the Christian discipline that began in the first couple of centuries when we had many writers in the time of Alexandria writing about the philosophies and teachings of the Son of Man. But nonetheless, this is my frustration. Good show, but also pretty shitty in terms of what it's selling us. And I'm hoping to delve into stuff that's a little more meatier with the stuff that we're going to do next, as well as if we get into Better Call Saul. It's still good as an... these shows are still good in terms of when they have good characters that are compelling and how they play off each other. I mean, the best thing about House of the Dragon is the dynamics of the family and how dysfunctional it is. From that standpoint, I do feel like we have a lot to analyze about humanity and dysfunction within a family and why those dysfunctions occur. Like we talked about Allison with her father, Rhaenyra with hers. That stuff to me is worth the time. So thanks, y'all. I'll let you guys get a break, and we'll do this again.